Hey, this is Pat with RacketStringingTips.com, and today, this is going to be fun. I'm just going to have some dialogue about what it means to string at a professional tennis tournament. So I have some information in front of me, and I've been asked a lot of questions about that, and it's January 2021. The Pro Tour is just about ready to get started with the first Grand Slam of the year, the Australian Open, and that has been my favorite to string at as an on-site stringer. So I kind of want to go over that and just kind of have some dialogue about that, answer some of the questions that I've had, and hopefully this is going to be informative for you, especially for those of you who are aspiring to string at a pro event. So I'm going to do a whole series of those throughout the tournament and kind of just highlight things, and as I learn more about what's going on this year, I'll try to shed some light on that as well and kind of give my opinion. And again, this is my experience based on what I had seen and experienced at the tournament. So again, let's go ahead and get started right into that. So first off, talking about a tournament, Australian Open starts on the 8th of February and goes till the 21st. Generally, you're going to have about a week of qualifying, or a couple weeks before, where players are going to come in and qualify for the event. And so generally, when you're stringing at one of these events, the stringers will be on site for about 3.5 weeks. Even though the tournament, you know, a Pro Tour tournament like a Grand Slam, generally is a 2-week tournament, you're going to probably be there 3.5 weeks total. This year, however, the qualifying is happening off-site, and it's happening Doha, Qatar is who's hosting the qualifying. So there's going to be actually different stringers there. Some of the stringers might be over there, and then they're going to follow the tournament, and then some of them will head over to Melbourne Park to do the stringing. So I'm not sure how that's working this year. When I was stringing rackets at the Australian Open, I was working with the Wilson team, and a few years back, Yonex has taken over the on-site stringing, so things are a little bit different, but for the most part, a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about are pretty much the same. Now, in order to be able to string at a higher level like this, you're going to have some additional training usually, or whoever's in charge of the stringing for whichever tournament for that team either knows you, or somebody that knows your ability to string, because you're not going to just be able to walk on and say, hey, can I string here? So that's not how it's going to work. So for me, starting at a pro event, working with the Wilson team, I had to go to, it happened at the same time that the US Open happened one year, and so I went to New York to get my 3-4 days of training in. So basically, this training had about 14 different components. Number one, calibration. You had to understand all about that, calibrating your machine, mounting, making sure all that was right, pre-stretching, string patterns, knowing all the different string patterns and the way that the team wanted you to string, and then some alternative ways as well. Pre-weaving the rackets, that's important. Now that, for a professional racket stringer, everybody pretty much pre-weaves the racket. And what I mean there is, when you install the frame into the machine, you're going to install all of the mains before you even pull your first string. Number one, it saves time. I know a lot of people, I've had stringers in the past tell me, well, I can string pretty fast, I don't need to do that. Well, that's just the standard, that's just how it goes. You pretty much pre-weave those mains in the racket. And cross strings, handling cross strings, keeping them from being burned when you're going over them too fast, figuring out how to pattern that. Dual tensions, that's a big component of this, because a lot of players that come in are going to want dual tensions. So your mains are going to be one tension, one string, and the crosses are going to be one tension and another string, or it might actually be the same string as well. It just kind of depends. And two-piece string, awls and hole, understanding where all the holes and the tie-offs, working with awls and sticking those in the holes for different reasons. And stringing machine care, making sure your machine and the clamps stay clean while you're stringing, and keeping your machine up, because you're going to be there for 2 weeks. It has to be any slippage can create a nightmare for you because you're going to have to restring that racket. And sometimes you don't have time because you're on tight stringing deadlines and stuff. And so I'll kind of go into that. And keeping your stringing area and all your tools and all that kind of clean, that's important because, I mean, some people are cleaner than others when they have their workstation, but generally there's going to be a lot of people that walk through there. The tournament directors will sometimes walk through there. A lot of players and coaches, and sometimes they do interview with some of the stringers, and so you have all sorts of people that come through there, and you know, whatever team that you're working for, they want to represent themselves the best that they can. So keeping a clean workspace, and you don't get things mixed up that way with different reels and different players string and all that. And then you also learn about the front desk operations. Usually you're not part of that, but when a racket comes in. And so I'll kind of go over all of those things. I'll kind of go over some of those things a little bit so that you can kind of have a feel of what it's like. So generally, generally a Pro Tour event such as, let's say, the Australian Open, you know, you have the draw, 128 draw, and of course you have, sometimes you have senior events, you have the men's, the women's, you have wheelchair tennis, you have if the qualifying is on site, you're going to have a lot of different tournaments within the tournament that you're going to be stringing for, possibly. So generally there's going to be about 12 to 15 stringers. Not all of them will stay for the whole duration of the tournament. Some of the main stringers will be there actually at the beginning, helping set up all of the machines as they come in. Sometimes the machine, because many of these string companies will, because you know they're moving from country to country when they're stringing, they'll have maybe some of the machines will stay in that country, so they'll kind of already be there. Other times they're going to be shipped in. So with all that, you have to calibrate the machines. You have to get them all ready because they all have to be exactly calibrated the same way, and they all have to be functioning the same way. So that's a lot of work. And so the stringers who get there early are going to be doing some of that, and you're going to help in getting that all ready, and maybe do a little bit of sightseeing, relaxing a little bit, because once you start stringing, you're not going to have time really for anything. Even watching some of the matches, you have a little bit of time, but not really a whole lot. So let's kind of get right into that then. So the first thing is, there are certain days where you're going to have more rackets. Generally at a pro event that's a Grand Slam, there's about 5,000 to 6,000 rackets that get strung through the duration of the tournament. And so there are certain days that they know by having the data from the previous years. So you kind of know what days you're going to have more strings. So many times when the players start coming in from other tournaments and they're going to be practicing, you're going to get a lot of rackets coming in. And then, of course, weather conditions can change that too. So if you get, if all of a sudden it's cooler, it gets warmer, or some rain, so that's going to change things as well. Because sometimes when a player gets to a tournament, what they're going to do is they're going to have maybe 3 or 4 rackets with them. They're going to go practice. They're going to have you string them maybe at different tensions, like 1 or 2 pounds difference, maybe some different strings, and so that way they can kind of get a feel for how fast the courts are. So you're going to kind of, get some of those variations. So you really have to watch and read the labels that are on the rackets, because even though you think, oh yeah, this player's bringing it in, I've been stringing it at 54 the whole time, and usually it's going to be in kilos, because a lot of the European players, they obviously go by kilos and not pounds. So you have to be able to switch back and forth on the machine and understand the machine. And so there's a lot of that goes on. Okay, so let me just start at the beginning. I have so much information I want to get out here. I'm just going to keep going through the next 2-3 weeks that the Australian is happening. I'm going to try to make a lot of these videos so I can kind of share everything I know about my experiences, and hope that just kind of like gets you motivated and excited about racket stringing. All right, so the first thing, a player brings their racket in and they'll drop it off at the front desk. It's going to be either the player, the coach, somebody working for the team brings in the rackets, and the first time they're going to bring in the rackets, they're going to bring in the reel of string. It's mostly reels that we deal with these days. Sometimes they'll have some sets as well, but most players have reels. They'll already have, if they've used it already, they'll have their name on it. That's important, otherwise somebody at the front desk will put their name with a Sharpie on it, and then they're going to take all the data as far as, like, you know, they'll take, of course, the credit card information and have it on file, and then they'll take all the specs of, you know, what you want the rackets to be strung at, things like that. And then every time they come in, then, okay, so what do you want in this racket? Okay, you got 2. When do you need the rackets? Okay, you're practicing such and such. Okay, it'll be ready for that. Do you need it delivered anywhere? Sometimes, you know, that'll be a situation. But you don't have to worry about any of that, because as a stringer, you're just stringing the rackets. So the rackets come in, they'll take them at the front, they'll cut them out, clean them a little bit, if, you know, with any dirt or whatever around the outsides. They'll kind of clean that, get the tag ready, and then it'll go back to one of the stringers. Now, sometimes when you've been at tournaments before and, you know, you've maybe strung for a player and they've liked how you've done it, they'll probably, then maybe you'll have a chance to get that player. If you are one of the main stringers at the tournament, you'll get some of the top tier players. If you're kind of new, maybe your first, second tournament, or you aren't as familiar with the team or whatever, they might just give you some of the lower ranked players at first to kind of, you know, try you out. And generally they're going to give a player to one stringer, and throughout the whole tournament you are going to be stringing for that player as long as they're there. Sometimes if you're not there for the whole 3.5 weeks as a stringer, of course they'll give it to somebody else when you leave. But the idea is, that's why you learn how to string the same way. Everybody learns on this, you know, the machines are all calibrated the same, so that way if something came up and somebody else had to string the racket instead of you, then they would be able to, you know, the player shouldn't really see a difference. Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. All right, so once those rackets come in and you've been assigned to certain players, or the player's been assigned to certain stringers, then anytime that racket comes in from that player, it's going to go in your bin. And in the past, I've been at some tournaments for when you're done stringing your rackets for a player, you're actually going to also be stenciling it and bagging it. And bagging it really means, you know, they're still using plastic bags. This is just some that I had from, this was actually another company and they came in with that, but that was from Australia. So it's a bag that when I was there, there's a whole racket. We were using these at the time, so forth. Now I think with, they're encouraging players to repurpose the bags, so, you know, we'll reuse the bags at some of the events. But that way the player leaves with a fresh racket in a bag, all stenciled, all ready to go on the court. Okay, so kind of back to it. So when you're stringing rackets, that's why I always, you know, emphasize how important it is to be consistent. Because what happens when, you know, 3 rackets come in and the player wants the exact tension, same string on all 3 of them, and you need to keep, you know, every pull, you know, when you pull the first 4 mains on one side and you pull the second 4 mains on the other side, you need to make sure that the rackets are all installed the same way, that you pull evenly, that you clamp at the same places, that you tie off at the same places, that you use the same force on all your pulls with the tie-offs, that you use the same method for stringing the crosses, the same method for pulling all of the strings, and, you know, using the extra weight from the machine to on tie-off knots, you know, a few extra pounds, figure out if it's 5 pounds, 10 pounds. Sometimes they'll the stringing director there will give you all those specs so that you stay consistent. But many times when it's up to you, you've got to just stay consistent. Because sometimes I've found that, like, I'll string 1 or 2 rackets, and, you know, if you got 4 or 5, you're working 2-3 hours with one player's rackets. And sometimes, you know, you start, you know, daydreaming or moving on, you know, because it becomes so routine that you can string these rackets. You can almost do it in your sleep after a while. But then you kind of forgot what you're doing, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, did I pull that one there? Did I pull? So it's just, you have to focus, and that's why stringing a pro event takes a lot of stamina. Not only are you standing for possibly 12 to 15 hours a day, and getting minimal sleep some days, especially during some of the large, depending on who your players are, but they try to even it out so all the stringers are pretty much, you know, not one or two stringers aren't inundated with too many frames to string. Sometimes, you know, with some of the lower ranked players, they will give them to somebody else if you've got way too many rackets to do. And, you know, people share, and everybody's really friendly. It's a great environment. It can become competitive too, though, you know, when you're like, okay, how many rackets have you strung today? How many? Okay, I've strung 30. Okay, I've strung 35. And so it takes a lot. And so you do, you know, your fingers get calloused, and you start taping up your fingers. You know, you got to keep your back strong, and so you've got to take breaks off your feet and rest and make sure you get enough to eat. And so all those things are important because you're stringing for a long time, and it's not just one day. You might be doing this for 20 days in a row. And so, you know, at the end of the tournament, you feel like you've accomplished a lot. But, you know, there's a lot that goes into that. So, all right, kind of getting back to it. I mean, I have a lot of stuff I want to share, so I'm, you know, kind of going back and forth, and, you know, I'll try to cover more. And again, I'm going to be making more of these videos, so if you have a specific question, you can put it in the comments, and then when I go to make my next video, I'll kind of go over those and try to answer some of those questions. I have some things written down here, you know, I want to go over as far as, you know, stenciling, labeling, and bagging rackets. So this is a place where if you are just getting started, you know, I want to throw in a little bit of that. If you really, you know, let's say you've been stringing rackets for 2-3 years, you've got some experiences on computerized constant pull machines, and you kind of want to take it to the next level and maybe string at an event, what you can do is find a tournament maybe in your area, maybe not a Grand Slam, maybe like at a club where it is a pro event, maybe a lower tier event, and they might need a stringer. Or they might need somebody to help with the stringing. So you got to kind of figure out, you know, who it is that's stringing. Maybe just volunteering at the tournament. I've worked at a lot of like 32 draw tournaments where, you know, we would just find some maybe, you know, high school kids or people who are just really into stringing, but they don't have the experience, and then they can be the person checking in the rackets, they can be the person cutting out, you know, we can teach them how to stencil correctly. You think, I know stenciling is easy, but stenciling actually takes a lot, because you have to get the logo exactly right. You got to make sure it's the right color, it has to touch the right strings. Companies are going to be looking out for this, and the players can get really mad if you don't do this right. And if you screw it up, you're going to have to restring the racket because you can't take it off. So, you know, all those kind of things. So really, that's a way to get in on a pro event. Basically, what you're going to be doing is you're going to just try to get into the tournament. Volunteer doing something else. Sometimes people like drive the bands, and sometimes people just work on this on site. And then you figure out where the stringing area is, and then you kind of start talking to people, and then you figure a way in there and say, hey, you know, can I just help, or can I just hang out? You know, as long as you act professional and you don't ask for autographs. That's like the big no there, because when players are behind the scenes, they don't want to have people gawking over them, and they don't want to have people like constantly asking them things. So act professional, like you're in a professional environment. Just learn and just do whatever you can, because that is the way to get in. Okay, I mean, of course you're going to need some experience, and then you can talk to the stringers and all that. Generally at a smaller event, that's the best way to get in there, and I'll go into that more on another video. But today I just kind of wanted to get this all started. You know, we still have a couple weeks before the Australian Open actually gets started. You know, go watch some of the online qualifying. Check out some stuff online. I'll be back in a couple days to share some more of this and kind of continue on this. Leave some comments. I hope this was valuable for you. And I guess that'll be it. I'll sign out on that. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Happy day!